Okay, here's another one that might make me cry. We're gonna read Pinocchio. Because he just wants to be a real boy. I'm getting ahead of the story. Long ago, a wood carver named Geppetto lived in a beautiful cottage with his cat, Fargo, and his fish, Cleo. One night, Jiminy Cricket chanced upon the cottage. As the cricket entered and made himself comfortable, he watched Geppetto apply a final coat of paint to his latest project. It was a puppet with strings. "I have just the name for you," said the wood carver, maneuvering the strings to make his puppet dance around. "Pinocchio." Gazing out the window, Geppetto cried, "Look, it's the wishing star." He wished his heart's desire. "I wish that Pinocchio might be a real boy." As Geppetto drifted off to sleep, Jiminy was startled by a bright, shimmering light. "It's a fairy!" he exclaimed. The blue fairy said softly, "Dear Geppetto, you have given so much happiness to others. You deserve to have your wish come true." She then touched Pinocchio with the tip of her wand as she said, "Little puppet made of wood, awake." There's Geppetto and his puppet. There's the cat. And then there's the fairy making Pinocchio come alive. Okay. Pinocchio slowly began to move. "I can move! I can talk! I can walk!" he exclaimed. "Am I a real boy?" The fairy explained that one day he could be a real boy, but he must prove himself brave, truthful, and unselfish, and he must learn to choose between right and wrong. As Jiminy Cricket listened, he turned to him and asked, Would you like to be Pinocchio's conscience?" The cricket nodded, and the fairy touched him with her wand. "I dub you Pinocchio's conscience, a guide along the straight and narrow path." The fairy's parting words were simple. "Be a good boy, Pinocchio," she said, "and always let your conscience be your guide." But Pinocchio wasn't quite sure how a conscience worked. "How will I know right from wrong?" Pinocchio asked. Jiminy tried to explain. He finally said, "Anytime you need me, just whistle." With all the commotion, it wasn't long before Geppetto awoke. "It's my wish! It's come true! This calls for a celebration." There's him becoming the conscience. Because apparently he wasn't born with a conscience. And then there's Geppetto figuring out that Pinocchio's real. Okay. Now that Pinocchio was alive, Geppetto thought he should do the same things as real boys, like go to school. Pinocchio was excited about his first day of school. But on the way, he was spotted by a couple of greedy, crooked characters, a sly fox named Honest John, and his crony Gideon. I'm sorry. His crony Gideon. Sorry. "A live puppet without strings," exclaimed Honest John. "We can make a fortune selling him to the great Stromboli for his..." Sorry. Why is his name Stromboli? Sidetrack. "For his marionette show." Tempted by fame, Pinocchio was easily convinced to go with them, but he soon found himself locked in a cage working for the evil Stromboli. I don't know where these names came from. "Let me out," Pinocchio shouted, shaking the cage. "Jiminy Cricket, help!" Jiminy tried, but he could not unlock the cage. Things were looking hopeless until the blue fairy appeared. When she questioned Pinocchio about what had happened, he told one lie after another. "Two monsters with green eyes got me," Pinocchio said. No sooner had he spoken when his nose began to grow. "And they put me in a sack," he added. His nose continued to grow longer and longer. "My nose, what's happening?" he asked. "A lie keeps growing and growing until it's as plain as the nose on your face," explained the fairy. "I'll never lie again. Please give me another chance," begged Pinocchio. The good fairy agreed, but warned him it would be his last chance. I love the names so much. I didn't realize that there was a person named Gideon in this story. That caught me off guard. Meanwhile, Geppetto searched everywhere for Pinocchio. He walked the streets calling out Pinocchio's name, but it was no use. He couldn't find his son anywhere. Honest John and Gideon bragged to a wicked coachman about selling Pinocchio to the puppeteer. They soon discovered that the coachman had plans of his own. He tricked the little boys who played hooky from school and took them to a place called Pleasure Island. This is Treasure Island. Oh, sorry. It's the next story. The catch was that they never came back. The boys that went there turned into donkeys. Then they were sent off to work in the mines. The coachman asked Honest John to bring him more boys. Later that night, Honest John and Gideon just happened to cross paths with Pinocchio again. They were able to convince him to travel to Pleasure Island. As Pinocchio's conscience, Jiminy Cricket tried to stop Pinocchio from going, but the wooden boy wouldn't listen. Instead, he set sail for Pleasure Island. Pinocchio and the other boys were thrilled to find a carnival with all the fun and food they could want. But things started to go bad when the boys began to turn into donkeys. Jiminy Cricket begged Pinocchio to leave, but it was too late. Pinocchio had already grown ears and a tail. What on earth was he going to do? If he didn't escape, he would be sent to work in the mines like the others. Why won't he just listen? Pinocchio needs to listen. Jiminy Cricket was given one job. It's not working. Jiminy, help! Pinocchio cried when he spotted the cricket. Come quickly, said Jiminy, leading him away from the island. Jump into the water. It's the only way out. After crawling down to shore, Pinocchio and Jiminy hurried home, but Geppetto wasn't there. They did find a mysterious message informing them that Geppetto had gone to search for Pinocchio. According to the note, Geppetto had been swallowed by an enormous whale named Monstro. Jiminy Cricket had heard of Monstro. He was a whale of a whale and had been known to swallow whole ships. But Pinocchio became brave and wasn't frightened at the thought of a whale. He ran straight to the ocean, tied a weight around his leg, and jumped in. He sank straight to the bottom. Pinocchio was amazed at the schools of fish, but every time he asked them if they had seen Monstro the whale, they swam away as fast as they could. Just hearing the name of the great whale scared them off. Meanwhile, Geppetto sat helplessly inside the belly of a whale, desperately trying to catch fish for dinner. He thought he would never catch a thing until the big whale began to swim and eat, swallowing every fish in sight. Geppetto and Cleo reeled in fish after fish as fast as the whale could swallow. But fish weren't the only things they reeled in. Pinocchio also ended up in the belly of a whale. He had found Geppetto. I think it's funny that Cleo's also fishing. Geppetto was delighted to see his little living puppet. They hugged and hugged. But in spite of his happiness, Geppetto told Pinocchio that their situation was hopeless and that they would never be able to escape. Just then, Pinocchio announced that he had an idea. We'll make Monstro sneeze, suggested Pinocchio. So they gathered all the wood they could find and built a gigantic roaring fire. Smoke filled the belly of the whale and escaped through his blowhole. Sniff, sniff. The smoke was getting to Monstro. Geppetto and his family boarded their raft and waited for just the right moment. Choo! Hooray, we made it, shouted the happy group as they sailed out of the whale's mouth and into the open sea. Monstro was furious and began to swim after them. Well, Hang on, father, yelled Pinocchio as they were tossed about by the waves. Save yourself, Geppetto shouted to his son. Pinocchio wouldn't leave his father. When everyone made it safely to shore, they spotted Pinocchio lying very still. Oh. But, they lit the whale's belly on fire. That's just... It's a little rude. I get that he swallowed you, but that's rude. Back home, Geppetto knelt beside the lifeless Pinocchio and cried, "My brave little boy!" Cleo, Figaro, figured out the name, and Jiminy Cricket all cried as well. No one noticed a soft light shining on Pinocchio or heard the voice of the blue fairy softly saying, "Prove yourself brave, truthful, and unselfish, and someday you'll be a real boy. Awake, Pinocchio, awake." Pinocchio sat up. He was no longer a wooden puppet, but a real boy. Father, I'm alive! I'm a real boy!" he exclaimed. Geppetto could hardly believe his eyes. It was true. Pinocchio had become a real boy at last. "This calls for a celebration," cried Geppetto. "Let the music begin." Everyone danced happily as they celebrated the miraculous turn of events. Geppetto and Pinocchio lived happily ever after as father and son. Look at them. So cute.